You have been at the receiving end of a lot of criticism for being a Perma Bull.
When you own an equity, whether it's through a mutual fund or whether it's directly, you become a partner in the business. Now you have to choose. If you're a partner in a particular business, are you going to be optimistic or pessimistic?
You can be a realist also.
No, what is the meaning of realist?
Okay. What are the concerns that keep you up at night?
There is a debate. So embodied AI is a clear threat to the workforce. So what's the use of India's demographic position, which is that we have a growing workforce? What do you do with people if suddenly machines are going to take over people's work?
And this is a low clerical staff that can be immediately replaced because of AI and technology, and they're very open about it. So what happens to all of those jobs that go missing?
AI is very good at taking historical information and presenting it to you. I don't think it is, right now at least, capable of doing something new. It is not capable of doing what Einstein did.
So you feel the reason for your success story is not luck, it is mostly the choices you've made in your life. Hey guys, welcome to the Money Mindset. My guest today needs absolutely no introduction. He's someone who's watched the markets for the last maybe 20, 25 years. I don't know how many. 35 years, he corrects me. Ridham Desai of Morgan Stanley is here with us. And he's someone who has received lots of bouquets, but also received lots of brickbats for his views. So we're going to have an honest, raw conversation with him about everything to do with the markets, the economy, and all of it. Ridham, thank you so much for being on the show.
My pleasure, Sonia. It's taken a while to come here, but yeah,
It has. But I'm so glad we've done this because I have been wanting to talk to you about several things for the last 1 year. And I thought this was an opportune moment also because there's so much happening around us. The noise is so loud that I wanted to sort of, cut through all of the noise and make sense of the situation. But you said you've been in this industry for 35 years.
Actually 40, if I count the early years when I used to do a lot of trading. As a professional for 35 years.
So 40 years since you've started trading.
Yeah, 1986.
I was born in 1986.
You made me look a little younger than I am by saying 2025. So thank you.
But I always ask people, how has the journey been? For you, it's been a phenomenal run, right, so far?
Yeah, I cannot change anything about it. There is my favorite music band is a band called Rush. I don't know how many people have heard about Rush. It's a Canadian rock band. And the drummer who died a few years ago used to be their lyricist. And Neil Peart had written a song, Headlong Flight, which is basically, I will not change single thing about my life. Just live it all over again.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's been just, I cannot ask for more. It's been incredible on every front, professionally, personally. I've loved every moment. I still continue to love every moment.
So you've been with Morgan Stanley how long?
I am now in my 29th year.
Wow.
Yeah. It's been largely Morgan Stanley. My professional journey is mostly Morgan Stanley.
Mostly Morgan Stanley.
Except for the first few years when I was in other firms. I did a little bit of my own thing also, which didn't work out. But yeah.
So what has 30 years of being in Morgan Stanley taught you?
See, Morgan Stanley is a phenomenal place. People on the outside have no idea what this thing is inside. And you have to be inside to know what it is. So, there are like Ridham Desai Square and Cube type of talent that's roaming around in the firm. So, it's just exceptional talent that this firm attracts. And then the platform. The access that I get from this platform is unbelievable. Right? And you've been in the television industry. You'd always want to interview someone from Morgan Stanley, right? Irrespective of who that person is. That's the reputation Morgan Stanley has as a Wall Street firm.
But don't you think you've kind of developed a brand in a way, your own personal brand, in a way that even if that Morgan Stanley tag is not there, you'd still be...
We'll only find out when I'm no longer with Morgan Stanley. We don't know as yet. It seems like that. It always seems like, this will survive the platform. But we don't know. We'll find out.
But
I'm not
generally,
holding out for that, by the way. That doesn't matter to me. I'm not going to try and hold on to anything that I have gained in the last 30 years after I finish this journey.
so, my reason for also talking to you is that now we are in this era of social media, right? And there is
By
so
the way,
much.
that's why it feels so noisy. There's nothing unique about noise. The world has always been noisy, but it feels more noisy because of social media or because of press, and because information gets to you much faster and in much larger quantities. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
No, fair, fair. That point is valid. And I've been in this information dissemination space for so long.
Correct.
And I realize that now is a time when it's just democratized, right? Everything is everywhere. So, how do you kind of cut through, get that, cutting edge information without everything attached to it? So, that's why I'm having this conversation with you. But you have been at the receiving end of a lot of criticism over the last year and a half.
That's
2
it.
years.
That's a short period to be criticized.
More than that, maybe, for being a Perma Bull and having targets for the index, which sometimes seem unrealistic given the situation. So, honestly, how have you reacted to all of that?
So first, let's get the targets out of the way, because I know that's a matter which gets debated in the press. You see, all index targets are relative. So you cannot take an index target in India out of context versus what my fellow strategists are saying about the rest of the world. So it's all relative. So if they go wrong, I go wrong. It's as simple as that. I cannot set a target which is distinguished from the rest of the world, because India is not a small market. It's one of the largest markets in the world. It's not going to behave so differently. It can underperform, it can outperform. But just hypothetically, suppose the SPX were to fall 20%. It's very unlikely that the Nifty goes up 20%. So, such idiosyncratic calls are now no longer possible on India. The world is very synchronized and things move together. They lead and lag. That's a different matter. And I can make calls about India underperforming or India outperforming. But the index target is hinged to what my global strategy team is saying. So, that's the first point. The second is that it is a 1-year view. And 1-year views on equities should be taken with a handful of salt, because equities is a long duration asset class.
But then why give that target anyway?
That's the requirement of my institutional client base. My research caters to my institutional clients, not to retail clients.
You can very well tell your institutional clients that, hey, look, no one can predict the market, so I don't want to.
I think they are fully aware of it. They're completely aware of it. But there is a context setting here, and there is a discipline around this. And there's a reason why we think in this fashion, because it kind of gives you a little bit of discipline. But remember that there is an institutional clientele that I'm catering to, not the typical retail investors. By the way, here I'll say that India's retail investors have matured enormously. They really don't care about these targets. If you look at how retail investors in India are behaving, they are behaving just the way they should behave, which is buying equities for the long run. And in fact, getting criticized en masse by a lot of people who think that, you can time the markets. But I think timing the markets is so hard. You can spend a lot of time in the market, and which is what you should do, rather than try to time it. Because timing can work once and then will fail once, and then you may arrive zero. Look at what our retail investors are doing. In March, the markets fell. There was a great amount of uncertainty, and they bought. They bought more than what they had bought in the preceding 12 months. So it shows a lot of maturity in the way they are behaving, and I think they're doing the right thing. Because, as I was saying, equities is a long duration asset class, and anything in equities which is less than 5 years or 3 years, you might as well then go to fixed income and don't bother about equities. But if you're there in the long run, it will work out. Now, again, I've seen articles where people have said India has not worked in the long run, and they have cited the last 10 years performance. And sure enough, but equities also are not a linear returning class. If you want linear returns, daily returns, go to a fixed deposit. Every morning you get up, your fixed deposit value will go up. Equities tend to give bunched up returns, very concentrated returns. So for a while they may look like they're not doing well, and then suddenly they'll go up and they'll compensate for all the underperformance of the preceding months and quarters. So these are characteristics of the equity markets, and I don't think it seems to me, at least from a distance, that retail investors in India are now understanding this much better than they did in the past.
But are they really? Because see, from my lens, when I speak to a lot of retail investors, right, this is the scenario where there is 2 years of no performance that the market has seen, and then comes people like Ridham Desai who give these very ambitious targets for the index every single year, which don't get met. And then there is this argument that Ridham is a Perma Bull. He's constantly talking about India being in a cyclical slowdown and not a structural one, when perhaps the macros are, indicating otherwise. Now, that is the premise.
Yeah. So
What
let's
would
move
your
away.
argument
Yeah.
be?
So let's move away from targets.
Okay.
Set that aside. But I'll just mention a target. In 2007 January, I had a target of 11,000 on the Sensex. The market was at 17, went to 22, and then eventually went to 11. I'm not saying I went right. I'm just challenging this thing that I'm a Perma Bull. There have been times when I've been bearish and also wrong, by the way, and bullish or also wrong. So it's not like if you're bearish, you go right, and vice versa. That's one. Second is that, see, equities as an asset class, given the amount of uncertainties you have to deal with, given the duration of this asset class, it is impossible to be in it unless you're optimistic.
That's true.
The example I give is of Elon Musk. Entrepreneurs have to be optimistic, otherwise you cannot build a business. Look at his optimism. He's going to build data centers in space. And there's nobody out there who believes this. He represents the extremity of optimism. You have to be an optimist if you want to own a business. Otherwise, you should own a deposit. Period. There is no ambiguity to this. Now, you may go.
Can I give you one argument here? And you can correct me if
Yeah.
I'm wrong. Fair. Elon Musk's optimism is fair, but his liability is his to bear. When there is optimism of someone who has a fiduciary responsibility of managing other people's money, and correct me if I'm wrong, isn't there a certain, responsibility for them to be realistic rather than falsely optimistic? And I ask you this as a retail investor, because I speak to a lot of retail investors, and their common argument is that everyone who runs, not you, I'm saying everyone who runs the mutual fund industry, everyone who runs money, retail money, is permanently bullish. Now, I am an eternal optimist with my own money because I've seen it grow over the last 10, 15, 20 years, right? But there are people who've entered the markets 5 years ago. When they hear this constant optimism, they somewhere feel
See,
disillusioned.
I'll tell you there are two things here. Firstly is that you spoke about domestic mutual funds. The fact is that they do churn, which means they sell some businesses they own, they buy other businesses. So to cite a view that they are permanently bullish is not true. They may be on the market, but not on individual businesses. They are churning their portfolio. That's how brokerages make their brokerage. So it's not true that they are only bullish about everything that they own. Second is that when you own a mutual fund, effectively you are owning a stake in businesses. You are a partner on the table. You are an entrepreneur. Now you have to, and see, the equity market is a very charming place in that sense. If on your own you chose to do a business, you probably can do one or two businesses. You will struggle to do more than that. Right now you are in this podcast business, so you can do one business. Maybe you can do something else on the side. Try doing a third business and you'll get stretched. What the equity market allows you to do is to own 20 different businesses. It's very charming, actually. It was apparently discovered it was introduced in Netherlands, and nobody knows who brought this concept of common equity, breaking down of a business into different parts so that many people can own it. But it is one of the most wonderful inventions of mankind. I mean, we cite the electric bulb and the telephone and AI, but I think the inventor of equity was probably, the reason why all these things happened, because he allowed, or she allowed, we don't know the gender of that person, allowed a lot of people to participate in entrepreneurial ventures, and therefore brought capital at scale, which is what created the progress of the planet in the last 400 years. This happened about 400 years ago. So when you own an equity, whether it's through a mutual fund or whether it's directly, you become a partner in the business. Now you have to choose. If you're a partner in a particular business, are you going to be optimistic or pessimistic? If you're going to be pessimistic, you might as well walk away, right? If you think your podcast stuff is not going to generate revenues, you'll shut it down, right? So if you continue to do it, it means you're optimistic. Whether you state that or not is irrelevant. Now, I'm a mutual fund manager, for example, and I'm managing money in the Indian market, and I'm going to be pessimistic.
No,
How do you make
you
it?
can be a realist also.
No, what is the meaning of realist?
Okay, so when the economy is going through something, right?
Yeah.
Like for example, India,
Yeah.
if you compare it to, and we can challenge our views, right? If you compare it to a lot of the Western economies, 10 years ago compared to today, 10 years ago, there was a lot of promise about India being relevant on the global scale, whether it is in manufacturing, whether it is in exports, whether it is in AI, whether it is in semiconductors. I've just taken 4 examples, right? On all these 4 examples, don't you feel there is a little bit of, an expectation versus disappointment kind of?
No, Sonia. See,
Loop.
the question is of time. So if you take a 1-year view, then you can paint a very cautious outlook and say things are not working out. If you take a 10-15-year view, there are debates, and we can come to the debates. There are some big questions sticking in my head right now, and you'll be surprised the nature of questions that are in my head. They have nothing to do with AI. There are other things that are happening in this country which create a little bit of debate. And these are debates I engage myself in, and then I come to some conclusions. But do I know what the future will be? I don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody knows what the weather will be tomorrow. How can I tell what the economy will be in 10 years? What I can create is a scenario. It is not the central outcome. It is the most likely outcome. But it can be wrong, because I am one of the many people thinking like that. And I can tell you right now, the way Indian stocks are trading, there's a deep skepticism about India's long-term story that is embedded in relative share prices. And I can also cite what could be the potential reasons behind that. We'll come to that in a moment. Riches just remind me. So I think when you say this, 10 years ago, and people easily forget, there were other debates. These debates which you just cited are today's debates. There was no AI in 2015. There was another debate about India's position in the world. We overcome that. I'll remind you what the debate was. The debate was that India cannot walk away from high inflation. We'd just been through 3 or 4 years of double-digit CPI, and it was taxing us, creating poverty at scale. And it was impossible for this country to walk away from that. Because, why? Because we have got supply-side constraints which make it impossible to control inflation. So suddenly the weather turns bad and tomatoes and onion prices go up. Suddenly there's a shortage in the economy and those prices go up. Our logistics don't work well enough. We cannot transfer goods from one place to another place efficiently and in good time, and therefore there are price disparities. Nobody's talking about those things anymore.
They still exist though.
No, they don't. When did you last see onion prices go up 100% in a week?
Maybe not 100%, but food inflation is still a concern.
So food inflation is a concern. But remember, in the last 10 years, we have brought down inflation volatility to a level which makes India the least volatile inflation in the whole world. We didn't achieve this by chance. It was deliberate policy action. That was the central debate in 2015. Now the central debate is whether we have got manufacturing prowess and whether we can build supply chains. Let's see in 10 years. These things don't happen in 1 or 2 years. Okay, I'll remind you, in 2015, we had written a report on the Indian railways. The average speed of an Indian cargo train in 2015 was 20 kilometers an hour. You could cycle faster.
Mhm.
Where are we now, 10 years later? Look at the transformation in the railways. It didn't happen just by chance. So that was the debate in 2015, that India's logistics costs are so high that India cannot be competitive. I'm not saying we have fixed all of it, but we've come a long way. And our logistics costs have declined measurably since then. The road network has improved. We all experience that. People tell me that roads in India are very bad. Granted, they are. They're not good everywhere. But in 1989, I had chosen, because I had to reach Vadodara from Mumbai quickly. And I chose to drive. It took me 16 hours from Mumbai to Vadodara on the then highway network, and the then car that I had, which was not my own car, which was somebody else's car. So I was driving in someone. It was a Maruti 800. Today it takes 5 hours. How did that happen? So I think the central debates will keep moving, and we'll keep fixing that. I'll give you a Morgan Stanley thing on this. So every year we have an evaluation. And long ago, 29 years ago, when my first evaluation happened and my manager sat with me, he gave me 3 development areas. That these are the 1, 2, 3 things, Ridham, you have to fix. And he says, you'll go fix this. Next year, I'll have 3 more for you. And this will happen till the time you're at Morgan Stanley. I still get development areas to do, fix. Okay. So nobody's perfect. So that applies to our country as well. We will always have things that we have to fix. And if you just focus on that, then you will think that the country is missing something. But what about all the things that we have actually fixed? I mean, my one of my relatives was telling me that I just filed my income tax returns and I got my refund in 1 hour. So I said, that's too slow. I filed my wife's return and she got a refund in 20 minutes. I mean, just think about that versus anywhere else on the planet. Is any country in a position to deliver an IT refund in 20 minutes? So I think we have, of course, made progress. Do we have to make more progress? Of course we have to. I mean, for heaven's sake, we're $3,000 per capita income. That makes us relatively poor. We're talking about countries that are doing 12, like China or America, which is at 70,000, or bulk of Europe, which sits at 80,000. We have a long journey to go. But imagine if we go up 20x from here and we're at $60,000. What do you think this country is going to look like? At 3,000, it already looks very different from where it was 20 years ago. So I think we're making a lot of progress. The pace can be debated. The areas will always remain debated. We'll always have things that we have to achieve, and they will get fixed. Like, I have fixed my development areas over 29 years.
So, fair point. I take all your arguments, but for me...
Okay, one more last point. That it is necessary for me to come and give an optimistic view when I appear on TV. It is almost necessary.
Why is that?
Because I don't want people to make the mistake of panicking. Because there was a Middle East conflict and oil went to $100, and because there was a tariff and there was a little bit of pain on India's trade. These are transient things. They don't last forever. They go away. The underlying story, in my view, and again, as I said, I don't know how the future will look like. In my view, is solid. It's rock solid. And I don't want people, especially retail investors who are the audience of television, my institutional clients are not watching TV, to panic because oil went up $20. It's not necessary. It's okay. You are doing the right thing. Just stay there.
But it's not about panicking. It's also about the opportunity cost, right? India has not given any returns in 2 years, while most global markets have given
that is okay. It happens.
Amazing returns.
It's not the first time that has happened. It has happened many times in my 35 years of professional careers that we've gone through 2-3 years. This is nothing compared to what we went through in the late 90s. After the tech bubble went bust in 2000, for 3 years, the market went nowhere. It just went down. In 2003 March, the index was at 2600 or something, trading at 8 times earnings. I was writing the preface of my conference booklet. We were doing our conference, and I still remember that 50% of India's $90 billion of market cap is coming to my summit. Please come. $90 billion was India's market cap. We've been through rough weather many times. We've been to worse. I mean, people cite currency. They forget what happened in 2013. The currency went down 20% in a month. It was worse than this. So I think, we've been through rough times all the while. Equity investing is not a linear, smooth, 45-degree angle. It goes through its ups and downs. And again, from a retail investor's perspective, it's a portfolio allocation. You take advice or you form your own view, but you put a certain part of your portfolio, hopefully not 100% like me, into equities.
Me,
Okay.
same.
Okay. And then now you don't want to keep evaluating that, because you have a fixed income portfolio, you have some precious metals, you have property, you have lots of other things.
Multiple assets.
Yeah, that equity portfolio should not be looked at with a 1-year view. There's no opportunity cost attached to some portfolio call that I've made, because in time it will deliver. And Sonia, you've been in this market long enough to know how stocks behave. They can go up 20% in a single day and cover up for 2 years of underperformance in a week. Nobody on this earth can predict that. Equities is something, that's why I'm not so gung-ho that AI can replace human beings in the equity markets. Because you cannot predict equities. They are so unpredictable, like the weather.
Okay.
In the short run, sorry.
In the short run.
Predicting equity markets for the next week or 1 month or next 1 year is harakiri.
It's hard. Fair enough. I think you should stop giving targets also. Honestly, in my opinion, you should tell your institutional clients that, hey, listen, no one can predict the markets. I'm getting too much backlash for my targets. So I'm putting an end to it.
Maybe I'll arrive there. I'll
note.
take your advice and we'll see where we get there.
Okay, fair. But you asked me to remind you about the questions that keep you up at night. What are the concerns?
Nothing keeps me up at night. Nothing keeps me
You
up
said
at
there are
night.
questions that,
No, there is a debate. So here's the debate. The debate is that India's fertility rate has dropped over the past few years. And we have now gone down to 1.9 or 2. And we've arrived at this fertility rate faster than a lot of other economies, and clearly before our per capita income rose. So the debate is our demographic advantage going to fall off? And therefore, we will not arrive at prosperity by the time our population starts declining. See, you have to do all this before your population declines. Now, let me just go a little bit left here, because this is also the AI debate and the debate on actually more than AI, embodied AI, which is when AI goes into machines and then machines start doing work in place of human beings. So the example I give is, like, I saw this robot in China last year, and this robot, Sonia, can mop the floor, it can clean your utensils, it can prepare a cocktail, it can fold your clothes. And, I told my wife that, listen, I found this thing, you can abuse it. It doesn't need vacation, just needs charging overnight when you're sleeping. And most critically, will not ask for a loan. My domestic help is at risk. So embodied AI is a clear threat to the workforce. So what's the use of India's demographic position, which is that we have a growing workforce? What do you do with people if suddenly machines are going to take over people's work? So the answer to that, so I'm answering that, then I'll go back to the fertility debate.
No, and in fact, you're right, because I was reading this article about how low-paying jobs are at very high risk because of AI. It's not just domestic help, but even if you look at, say, banks, for example, right? I was reading that HDFC Bank has hired the lowest amount of people in the last 9 years. So, and this is a low clerical staff that can be immediately replaced because of AI and technology, and they're very open about it. So what happens to all of those jobs that go missing?
So one thing I'll say, Sonia, is macro is not a summation of anecdotes. A lot of people think that if a particular company has not hired, or a particular group of companies or sector is not hired, the macro is bad. That's not how macro works, because jobs keep changing all the time. And the most important historical episode that we should stick in our head is the horse carriage movement of the 1890s. Commute in New York City was horse carriages, And Henry Ford commercialized the car, and taxis started sprouting. And a lot of horse carriage riders basically looked the other way, saying that this ain't working, it's too expensive, etc. And a generation of them died in extreme poverty. But America created more jobs than it ever had. And the auto industry created prosperity which America had never seen before. And in fact led to the bull market of the 1920s. So, just because a group of horse carriage riders are going to become jobless, that doesn't mean the macro is bad,
Fair.
right?
So if you had to draw an analogy of the horse carriage movement to what's happening with AI today, what would your
So let me come
analysis
to
be?
that. So there is a concern, but remember one thing, and this is what I think is something which everybody has to think about: that if AI is going to replace all labor on the planet, either directly or through embodied AI, then what will AI work for? Whom will it work for? What will the factories, for whom will the factories produce clothes, shoes, mobile phones? Because human beings are the only living organisms that consume anything other than food. Everybody else, the animals, plants, they only need food. They don't consume anything. They don't wear clothes, they don't drive cars, they don't use mobile phones. So who's going to, so basically if you take this to the logical conclusion, the world will collapse. Economies will collapse and we'll go back to the Stone Age. There is another peril of AI, which I really worry about, which is that all human progress has come from imagination, from thoughts. And if you stop thinking and stop imagining because AI is going to do everything for you, global progress will stall. So the question I have for all the AI stalwarts is the following: that answer these three questions for me. Can AI discover fire? It was a seminal moment in human progress when fire was discovered. Fellows were rubbing stones and suddenly a spark and fire. It changed humanity forever. Can AI invent a light bulb? Edison did that in the 1870s. It was a step change. There was no historical information that would have created the light bulb. It just descended in Edison's head. And third, even more critically, can AI discover the second law of thermodynamics? Which I don't know if you know, but it's in simple terms, entropy always increases. And the answer to this, and I've asked this question to scientists who don't have vested interest in this whole AI game, and they say 1 and 3 not possible, 2 maybe. And I challenge that. I don't think even 2, because the electric bulb was a discrete event. AI is very good at taking historical information and presenting it to you, in nice conversational English. I don't think it is, right now at least, capable of doing something new. It is not capable of doing what Einstein did, sitting in his office as a clerk, the theory of reflexivity descends, and that completely changes the insights that physics has about the universe. So I think there are limitations here. Maybe this thing changes, but there are some use. So I'm not denying the uses of AI. There are use cases, but I don't think it is a thing that is going to destroy all employment. It will create new jobs. Some jobs will become archaic. If you are young, in your 20s, looking to build a career, just be wary of this. Like, I come from a pre-internet era, pre-email era.
Correct.
In 1996, we were told that email has come. And my first email exposure was mainframe email, not like what we have. And in mainframe, there was no cursor. There was a backspace. So if you made a mistake at the beginning of the sentence, you had to delete the whole thing and start all over again because there was no cursor. But the first job that went away was the guy who operated the fax machine. Because our reports used to get faxed. Now they could get emailed. So the fax guy's job went. But has email created more jobs than we had before? Of course it has. The internet was going to destroy the retail sector. 25 years later, do we have more people in the retail sector or not? Or rather, I should say, do we have more people in the business of delivering goods and services to customers or not? Of course we do. We got a new industry in logistics. Dozens of companies sprouted up.
Quick commerce also.
Yeah, so many new things happen. So it's very hard for us to anticipate, but AI will create new jobs at unprecedented pace. So I don't worry about it. But wait, let me just finish that conversation about the doubt that is there in my mind, on which I will still come out positive on it. But the thing is that if India's fertility rate has declined, is it possible that we may not continue with our demographic advantage long enough before we become prosperous? And that is certainly a possibility. But there is a very charming upside from a declining fertility rate, which people are missing out on. So I'll explain this. So when your fertility rate was high, essentially in India, women, and this is not only India, it happened everywhere on the planet when fertility rates were high, women could not work because you were basically taking care of the kids. Somebody had to stay back home. And the way society works is that the woman stays back. That's unfortunately how society works. By the way, you have to go back to ancient human history. The fact is, because as a species we walk, therefore our babies are born much before they should be. And hence they need tender, loving care much longer
Than other animals.
And a tiger can let its cub out in the open at the 4th month.
Correct.
We have to take care of our kids till the age of 10, 12 because they're just not capable since they are born premature, because that is the nature of, what happens to a woman's hip because we
Human
stand
evolution.
up.
Yeah, of course.
And that is why we need a home. That's why we need a home. And this is, the whole thing about renting doesn't work in the long run. You need a home because you need to grow your family. But anyway, the upside is now that the fertility rate is lower, the woman can come out to work. And if you look at the history of modern world progress, the inflection points were when labor force participation amongst females rose. The seeds have been sown and the ground is ripe for this to happen, because our fertility rate now is at a level at which female workforce participation will go up and therefore growth rate will go up. One.
Okay,
Second
on that, I was recently reading a report from NSO where they spoke about this, about women labor force participation in India. And as you rightly said, almost 60% of the respondents who are women who are out of the labor force said the reason they're out of the labor force is because of, child care and elder care and home care and work. So even if the fertility rate reduces, the women who are still giving birth, right? If they are not supported enough, and I'm just asking you the question here, is enough being done for them to come back into the labor force? Because the participation rates are still quite low if you look at it compared to the rest of the globe.
Yeah, but up a lot.
Compared to India.
Where we were. They're rising. And of course, there are challenges. And in an urban setting, I think there are better facilities than a rural setting. And those will get overcome. But the fact is, the biggest impediment was that I don't have kids to take care of. Now, there is another consequence of this. The biggest financial burden on any couple is grooming and raising their kids. If you have fewer of them, you spend fewer resources on your kids. You have resources to do other things. So on both counts, this is extremely bullish for the next 20-25 years for India. Now, there is a downside risk, longer term, that our demographics would have started deteriorating and we may not have become prosperous. And therefore, it is critical. And this is where, I do applaud the Prime Minister. 2047, very explicit target. We want to become Viksit Bharat. And mind you, if you achieve that, then that tail risk of declining demographics will not bother us. But if we don't, then it may. So the next 2 decades, I think, are very critical for India. We need to do a lot more at any point in time, a lot more than what we are doing. And there's a lot of policy effort in that direction. And there is a risk that we will not make it. And there is also a risk that we make it. I will remain an optimist that we will make it.
You said the biggest financial burden of a couple is raising their children. Now, I beg to disagree here, very respectfully, because I feel like if there is enough support from the society, the government, the social infrastructure, we can have a higher fertility rate and more women in the labor force. The reason why urban Indian women or urban couples are not having children is because the cost of living is just so high. There is a scarcity of jobs. Inflation is eating into your earnings. How private schools are so expensive.
But you just
How will you? No, I'm saying it's you may want to call it a financial burden,
Yeah.
but if there is support from different ends, look at the middle income. They are
Sonia,
taxed.
it's also psychological. There's no dearth of support in the Western Hemisphere, but their fertility rates have crashed. Because the fact is, when people become prosperous, they don't want to be burdened by kids. You see, if you go back to ancient human history, there were two reasons why kids used to be produced at scale. One was there was no certainty about survival. So infant mortality, which is kids who died before turning 5, was very high. The second is that you needed hands. Hands to hunt, hands to farm, hands to go to the factory. Now, once you become rich, then neither of these factors actually come to hurt you. Infant mortality is irrelevant because you have already taken care of very high quality healthcare, and therefore you are not, a victim of that. And second is that you don't need hands. So prosperous people, by definition, have low fertility rate, and
That is when they don't want to have children by choice. Ridham.
Yeah. So
you have to understand that
so
in
this
the
is a
middle
choice
income,
only.
No, but in the middle income category, there are many people who want to have children, but they don't have the privilege to have children because of how high the cost of
That's
living
not
is.
true.
Let's be honest.
No, that's not true, because when you do the geographical spread of India's fertility rate, the fertility rate is significantly higher in poorer states and significantly lower in richer states in India.
And what about the middle income?
No, they are also somewhat better than the poorer states. Okay, so when you break this by income cohort also, if income is on this axis, fertility rate is like this. So it is a little higher in the middle income. So it is not like it has declined here and then it's gone up and it's like this. The chart curve is not like this. The curve remains like this. So the fact is that all these arguments are valid. And now people say that, poor people are producing the kids. That's bad. No, that is exactly what is required, because aspirations are only amongst poor people. Rich people are not aspirational. Very few rich people have, this was, I think Uday Bhai had tweeted about this, that rich people are going into family offices and not going to factory. Obviously, they won't. I mean, which rich kid wants to sweat it out in a factory? Father ne kaam kar liya abhi, now I will sit at home in an air-conditioned office. By the way, this is also good for the country, because growing up here, the biggest constraint to entrepreneurs, to budding entrepreneurs, people with innovative ideas, was access to capital. Today, that's not a problem, because there are scores of family offices that are willing to bet that your idea will work, I'll give you money. And that's going to happen now. So India will see ideas work at scale. Another criticism that is widespread in the social media is India's low R&D spending. But that's not a problem. It is bound to be low because India is poor. R&D spending doesn't scale linearly. It scales exponentially. So comparing India with China is just not justified, because China's income is 5x of India. When India gets to Chinese levels, its R&D spending will also be 5x of where it is today. As a percentage of GDP, not in absolute terms. It scales non-linearly.
So I had the same question.
Poor people cannot take the risk of working on projects with unknown outcomes. But family offices are allowing that to happen. Sonia, I spend a lot of time meeting startups. And the number of startups in this country working on just completely there's a guy, I've not yet met him, but I just learned about it, who's using snake venom to create new chemical entities. Because apparently snake venom has got the most complex protein structure across all natural ingredients on the planet. And you can actually discover new drugs. Like, who could do this 20 years ago in this country? We have companies that are set up to send satellites, and we have companies that are working on quantum. We've got companies that are working on more than just the normal consumer facing tech. There's a lot of deep tech happening in India, which wasn't the case 10 years ago. How did it suddenly happen? Because there are tons of family office. So anyway, the thing is that this fertility rate debate is clearly there in my head, and I know that there is a downside risk, but I'm choosing to be optimistic because I think the next 20 years India will get to that prosperity, which will then make this debate irrelevant. But by the way, the market is not fully convinced. And the reason why the market is not fully convinced is because India's growth was quite slow for almost a year and a half. And the market can have a lot of short-term attributes in its behavior. It can get very short-term. And therefore thinks that, okay, this is how India will be in the next 10 years. But I think it will inflect. And there were reasons why India's growth slowed down. And I think we have reversed those factors.
So on this point about R&D spends not being high, right? And I completely take your point that as the per capita GDP goes up, the risk-taking capacity also will go up and more money will be put to work. I asked the same question recently to Amitabh Chaudhary of Axis Bank. And he said that as a banker, one thing he has noticed is that the ease of doing business is still not as high as it should be in India. And entrepreneurs are, because of all the hassles about whether it's bureaucracy, red tapeism, putting a factory, the logistical and the legal, hassles. And of course, he was also talking about how if there is any problem with your factory or your plant or your asset, and a bank, from a banker's POA, and a bank, puts or it goes to NCLT or whatever, you run the risk of not staying an entrepreneur henceforth, that you may not get loans, you may not get funding. So from your lens, do you think the fact that India has not made as much progress in ease of doing business is something that could be restricting a lot of not just R&D but manufacturing capex?
So I'll give you a long answer to this. Back in the early 90s, and I come from a time when India dismantled what we call as the license Raj. The license Raj was really IDR, the Industrial Development Regulation Act. It was put into force in 1951. The idea being that India had just walked out of colonial clutches, and there was great skepticism amongst our leadership then that if we traded with the world, we'd again go back into their clutches. So we chose to make everything from a pin to an aeroplane. We didn't want to trade. We were so scared. And justifiably, we had just gone through many, many years of captivity. But the idea remained in force for 40 years. It got removed in 1991, March. In these 40 years, the thing that suffered the most was manufacturing. Because manufacturing is where you need deregulation. And so India's manufacturing GVA averaged 17% of GDP. In 1991, all of us was there. I was still a young analyst, and we all turned very bullish on India's manufacturing. Because for the first time, you could make as much cement as you want, sell it at the price that you think was the most viable, not have to depend on government approvals to get access to raw materials or to the markets. Remember, all of these things were controlled under the license Raj. Now we are about 35 years post IDR. So almost the same period, 40, 35. Our manufacturing has averaged 16% of GDP, 1% less. So one thing is clear, it took 35 years for me to understand this, a little less maybe, that license Raj was not the proximate reason for the failure of manufacturing. There was something else. And then when you start looking for the reasons, you find that there were a lot of other things that did not get fixed in 91 that were far more critical than license Raj. For example, factors of production. So the wisdom of our constitution writers, Dr. Ambedkar and company, when they wrote the constitution, their wisdom was that India should be run as a decentralized country. And the decentralization in India works like a charm. It's quite phenomenal. Very few experiments in the world that have been as successful as India in a decentralized political economy. But they also therefore concluded that the factors of production should stay with the state. The powers of taxation will be with the center. The state will control land, labor, farm, electricity. Now, one of the consequences of this was that our coal resources are concentrated in eastern India. But because every state was given the need to have its electricity, we dispersed our power production, electricity infrastructure. So for many years, our coal traveled inefficiently on rails to arrive at a coal plant that would be located 1500 kilometers on the other side, like say in Gujarat or Maharashtra, to produce electricity. Extremely inefficient, because electricity is far cheaper traveling on copper wires than on rail. But we did that. So we achieved our decentralized objective politically, but the cost economically proved to be quite exorbitant. And in fact, even today, the electricity sector remains a problem. It's only in the last 12 months that on the aggregate, our state electricity boards for the first time produced profits in 75 years. The tariffs in this country are 3x, 4x of competing countries. And manufacturing depends on electricity. How do you think we can compete in manufacturing with such high costs of electricity? And this did not get fixed in 91. Has only started recently getting fixed. And we have a long journey to go to bring down our cost of electricity.
But why hasn't it happened till now?
Because
As
of
in,
the
why
way,
isn't, I mean, in the last 5-6
Sonia,
years?
when we did GST, there was a fund manager in the US that I was talking to. And in that conversation, he said something that, it's remarkable that you guys have done GST. Because in GST, the states of India gave up their power to tax goods and services forever. Right? With the exception of alcohol, petroleum, and a couple of other things. They gave up their power. He says, if we tried this in the United States, it'd probably take 100 years and we'll still not agree. The 50 states in America would not agree to give up their power to tax. See, it's natural, right? The constitution has been built in a certain way for certain reasons. Now, of course, 75 years have gone past since then, and maybe the context has changed. But the fact is that states are not going to give up their power to do these things. And the progress varies across states. It's not uniform. Some states are making progress and are now attracting manufacturing. Others are not. We're not getting that uniform outcome. There's very little the central government can do except float Uday 1, Uday 2 and give fiscal incentives to force some reform. But the state leadership will have to take it upon themselves. The example I give is labor, right? So, Amitabh is talking about this, right? But labor is a state subject. It wasn't for want of trying at the center. The states are not willing to adopt the code until now. Talk about land. 2015, we tried to do land reform. The states did not agree because land, again, concurrent subject, the states have superior lawmaking power than the center. So factors of production. The second thing was taxation. We had a very archaic taxation, and a lot has changed in the last few years. So our corporate tax now is comparable with our competitors. Our indirect tax is getting there, but still not there. There are still some things to bridge, like there are, inverted duties that need to be fixed, and they have still, not all of it has been fixed, and hopefully this budget will fix some of the remaining issues. GST, is still not where it has to be, and it's getting there. It takes time. We're getting there. We rationalized the GST tax structures last year. There's one more round of rationalization. Ultimately, we want to go to a single rate. And that will make the country a single country like Europe is, with borders, state borders. But then I think manufacturing will become far more viable. So I can go on, but there are so many things that needed to be fixed which did not get fixed. But by the way, have been fixed to a great extent in the last 5 years, Let's see what happens in the next 10. I remain very optimistic that India is arriving at the manufacturing scene. We have an official forecast that our share of manufacturing in GVA will be up 5 points in the next 5 years. We're getting there. A lot of spaces will be vacated by China. China's labor costs are 5x of India now. In labor intensive sectors like textiles, like leather goods, like jewelry, they cannot compete now with India. So India is set to gain global market share. And I was just checking, we are already gaining market share in a lot of these sectors. So this is already happening. It's a silent revolution in the country.
But one economist was telling me that manufacturing as a percentage of GDP has stayed in this 12, 13, 14% mark for the last 10, 15 years.
Well,
and there's been no progress there.
well, not
And
na-
while, maybe not 10 years, maybe 8 years, but while a lot of other countries, whether it's Vietnam, whether it's Bangladesh, I'm not even talking
Yeah.
about China,
So,
right,
you know,
have moved ahead.
So in closed rooms like this, there's a lot of debate about India's inferior performance to China, and India gets smashed. And then, I stop the conversation by saying, let's do one thing. I agree that India has not achieved what China has done in electric vehicles. So we've not created a Chinese type of electric car company. But let's try this. Take one of our large IT services companies. I give China 20 years, build that and show it to me. They can't. So one of the reasons why manufacturing, because see, this is relative, is because of COVID. In COVID, something happened. For years, Morgan Stanley has always allowed people to work from home. But nobody ever exercised that. There was a fear of missing out, right? You wouldn't not come to office unless there were really exceptional circumstances.
I was very happy working from
Yeah,
home.
no, you are not. This is post 2020. Post 2020, a psychological transformation happened. Because we worked from home and we saw that it didn't matter, that's why now working from home seems to be fine. Prior to 2020, it wasn't the case. You would only do so if you had an exceptional circumstance. So 2020, what happened was multinational CEOs realized that it's okay to work from home. Now, if you're going to work from home, you're an American corporation, you're better off in Mumbai than Florida. See, a lot of Wall Street people went to Florida to work. And they realized that, you might as well ship that job to Mumbai. It's a whole lot cheaper to do it here. What India provided to the world was, of course, cheap labor, but more critically, skilled, at scale, and highly disciplined. So they could hire hundreds of people in a week at a cheap price, people who were willing to come to office at 4 in the afternoon and therefore synchronize with your work day, work till 3 in the morning here and then go back home and sleep during the daytime while you were sleeping, and very disciplined. So this is not something that anywhere on the planet, by the way, it's not for want of trying. We have tried lot of places to do offshoring. It's not worked. It's only worked in this country. It's a phenomenal success and we got to applaud it. And it's one of the reasons why manufacturing lost share, because services gained so much share.
So on services, since you brought up that topic, right? And your view is contrary to what a lot of people think about IT services now. Even if you look at the recent data, right? Recently, Wipro just came out with their numbers where the company spoke about how discretionary spending has gone down. Clients are uncertain, especially in areas like energy, etc. And they are not sure about how things will progress. Now, you can argue whether it's because of AI or not, but traditional IT services, the business model is being challenged. What do you think the future of that could be?
Obviously, there is a challenge, but the challenge is more to do with GCs than AI.
The GCCs.
Yeah, the GCCs have taken jobs away because it's now far more convenient and easy to set up GCCs in India. And therefore, people, even if they have just 500 people, hitherto they went to an IT services company. They're saying now we might as well do it in-house and we maintain better control. And by the way, the IT services companies have divisions that deliver GCs. So you are a multinational company, you want to set up a small GC in India, the IT services company will give you end-to-end solutions, including hiring the people. Because this is anyway cannibalizing their business. The last 3 or 4 years, it's largely been so let's not confuse IT services with India's success in services. India's success in services remains. The breakup of that has skewed towards GC versus IT services in one part. By the way, GCs do much more than just coding, more than IT.
Correct.
It's only 50-60% is IT, 40% is non-IT.
And GCCs are there across industries also, where they look at pharma, you look at chemicals,
it's
all
there
of that.
everywhere.
Yeah.
Now, the problem with IT services is that they've also gone through a cycle. And that cycle has to do also with AI. It does create a bit of uncertainty. If I'm going to launch a big project right now and there are these AI tools at my disposal, I'm thinking through them as a CTO. What should I do? Right? Then there is a budget that I'm transferring to AI because I'm trying to embed AI. I'm trying to do, I'm buying tokens. I'm asking my employees to test this out. So there's only that much capital available to do tech spending. AI is grabbing. So these are the near-term uncertainties. But if you give me a 5-year view on this, I think Indian IT will come out good. AI is God sent. I mean,
Why do you say Indian IT will come out good?
This is a very loose thing. So it's not a very accurate description, but it's the best for a lay audience to understand that imagine your problem is to drive a screw into a wall. So hitherto you used a screwdriver. Now you have a machine. The machine allows you to put that screw much faster. You probably can do it 50 times faster. Now AI is like that. So what IT services companies did was use code to deliver solutions to their customers. By the way, they didn't deliver code, they delivered solutions, engineering solutions. They solved problems. The raw material was code. The raw material was a screwdriver. Now, instead of the screwdriver, now I have a machine. I have AI that can code. If my costs are going down, is that good or bad for my business? So now the argument is that if the cost goes down and coding cost by AI will be materially lower, say 95% lower, I'll have to cut my pricing. And if coding was say 30% of my total cost, my pricing will go down by 25%. Right? And if my pricing goes down 25%, my revenues will fall. My margins may not go down because my costs also are going down, but my revenues will go down.
Correct.
That's the bear case, right? But what happened in cloud? When we went from ERP to cloud, the cost went down, the volume surged. And the 5-7 years of the previous decade proved to be a golden era for Indian IT companies, like the Y2K. Because cloud led to, so if your target company set was 50 companies, it became 500. In AI, it becomes 50,000, 100x. So I think as the dust settles on this and as people realize what they have, ultimately you have to deliver a solution. AI will be the backbone, but the solution will still come from Indian IT companies.
But what if, like most
you
companies,
still need a carpenter, by the way, Sonia. I don't know if you have ever used a machine. I've tried doing it. It's very hard if you are not a carpenter to drive I can do it much better with a screwdriver. So the IT services companies will actually be needed even more.
You think so?
Yeah, because imagine security. It's a big concern.
Cyber security is a big thing.
No. In AI, the leakage of data. I mean, a CEO, 2 CEOs in the last 1 week have raised this concern. Reverse information paradox. The risk of giving away so much of your business that you become prone to getting competed out of it. It gets created by AI. Who's going to build the security patches for you?
So then why are clients spending much less than they did earlier?
No, this is a cyclical thing, as I said, right? Because there's a massive technology shift happening. So you want the dust to, it may last for a few more quarters. It may not go away. The GC hiring continues, but the IT services business may remain muted for a while before they see. Some companies are getting contracts. By the way, I collated this data. Last 1 week, 15 contracts have been signed for Indian IT companies. That's a contract every 2 days.
But as an investor, and of course, most of our audience are retail investors, right? As an investor, it doesn't make sense to me to stay invested in IT companies. I mean, I'd rather just put my money in a bank FD because of the growth. Why would I want to be in a company which has 1-2%
Sonia, when
growth?
it makes least sense, that's always almost always the right moment to invest. I quoted this and then I struggled to remember where I had found this quote. It stuck in my head. I got trolled recently when I gave an interview on a TV channel, and in the middle of few sentences I said that reading is a waste of time. That got stuck as a headline, and then people went after me. I never meant to say that. There was a context, right? So anyway, we'll not go into that. But the maximum return in the stock market is at the point of maximum uncertainty. The maximum uncertainty of my life has been COVID, not global financial crisis. In the global financial crisis, we had some idea of how this will unwind. In COVID, I didn't even know whether I was going to be alive. And that was the point of maximum return. So as the uncertainty rises, the return also rises. So then I was looking for how did this thing came into my, it couldn't be, I am not a genius to come up with such a phrase. And then I realized that this was, I borrowed this from a seminal economist of the 1920s. Okay, that was Frank Knight. He has written a book which basically says all profits come from uncertainty. So the more uncertain you get about something, the greater is your profit opportunity. So if you feel very uncertain about IT, think about this, that profit is getting embedded in that trade. Now, it doesn't mean that you succeed all the time. You may fail once in a while, and it may, but from a portfolio context, it's the right time to take a call on something which is uncertain. India feels very uncertain right now. Give it 3 years, it may be the best performing market in the world. And all the certainty that's there in other places will not be very good for their returns. It's a very natural thing, and you must read the book. All profits come from uncertainty.
Wow. Okay. So this has been an amazing, learning for me, and we've covered so many topics. So Rhythm, thank you for your time, your mind, your wisdom. I really learn a lot every time I sit with you, and I think this has been one of the longest conversations that we've had. So you've, had that space to elaborately talk about your views. But just wanted to wind down with a few thoughts, right? In one of your recent reports, and I think somewhere that you mentioned, of course, you have a Sensex target of 89,000, and we've discussed that by June 2027. That's your base case target, right? But you also believed earlier that India may be cheaper than its own history, but as a on a valuation parameter, basically. My argument to that is that if you compare India to a lot of peers, global peers, we're still a very expensive market. So when you talk about being cheap compared to the past, what is the argument when you compare it with, say, global peers? Because it's still a very expensive market, and to justify expensive valuations with not so great earnings, although earnings have picked up in the last couple of quarters, how do you do that?
So first of all, it's not rich, but let me take this on. So see, equities, as I said, is a long duration asset class. Bulk of the value lies in the terminal. It's not in the next 12 months growth. So the next 12, 24 months growth doesn't play a role. The multiple, that 20, 10, 15, imagine you're paying 15 times next year's earnings. Why would you pay 15 times? Because there is a terminal growth rate. And that terminal growth rate for India, I argue, is the highest in the world. And it makes all the difference. So let's give you the contrast with, say, China. So China has got a declining population, has got excess capacity, has got a problem with property rights, which is why people oversave and therefore underconsume, and therefore has got a perennial problem with terminal growth. Contrast that to India, population is growing, notwithstanding the decline in fertility rate. Our population will still grow at this fertility rate. It's not going to stop growing. We don't have anything with property rights, so we have a very good blend of consumption and saving, 20-80. We spend 80% of our income. It's a population that is actually seeking to consume. We don't have a psychological problem around it. And therefore, we have a growth rate which can continue for a really long time, way beyond our near-term horizon of next quarter, next year, way beyond AI, way beyond a lot of the other disruptions that may be happening in the world, way beyond the Middle East conflict, etc. So that's what equity markets care for. So what appears to be expensive to you is not actually expensive in the context of India's superior terminal growth.
Then why have FIs left in a big way?
So one thing, so there are two aspects to this, right? One is that it's technical. If domestic investors show up every morning at 9:15 to buy 100 crores, 200 crores, 500 crores, 1000 crores of stock, somebody has to sell. If corporates are not issuing new equity, then the foreigners will sell because there are only three cohorts. That's the technical, simple explanation. The second is the relative opportunity of return. A lot of capital in the world is very short term. It is not long term capital. In fact, Indian retail is far longer term than foreigners. I have computed the holding periods of Indian retail versus foreigners. Indian retail on an average holds stocks for 35 months. Foreign investors hold stock for 7 months. So they are not even holding out till the annual report comes. They're not holding out for their next dividend. Indian investors are holding stocks for 3 years. So there's a difference here. If you are looking to maximize your short-term return opportunity, there's a lot happening on the planet. There's a huge AI capex cycle. There's a huge defense capex cycle in Europe. There's a lot of earnings. You cited the thing that India's earnings have improved, but it's still in the near term very inferior to what is happening in, say, Korea, Taiwan, in the US, in Japan. All those near-term earnings growth rates are multiples of India, not just 5% higher, 2x, 3x, 5x of India's. So there is a lot of short-term return opportunities, and those happen from time to time. But the charming thing about India is this growth is far more sustainable and will last much longer. And B, it's very diversified. It's not dependent on a single trend. It's not dependent just on AI or just on defense. It is coming from multiple sources. So it's a far more reliable growth rate, and eventually this will turn. So India is relatively inexpensive versus its own history to other markets. It is. In fact, I look at price to book because it looks through earning cycles. The relative price to book is the lowest in my career. It has never been lower than this. The trailing 12-month, 24-month return is the worst ever. And the ownership of foreign investors is also at near all-time lows. It's a good recipe for a major upside when it comes. And it will come in a very quick period of time. It will not take years for it to happen, because that's the nature of equity markets. When they bounce very hard. They fall very hard. They can be very volatile.
I've seen that a couple of times, and it's always in hindsight that you regret, not putting more money to work. I take that point. We were talking in the break about this concept of nations, right? And of course, everyone eventually thinks about, when you think about your country, when you think about growth, you think about progress. There are lots of arguments. But what is the overarching theme when it comes to nations?
So see, nations are human creations. They are not natural to the planet, right? When an animal crosses from one country to another country, presumably crosses the border, nothing happens, right? When a human being does that, all hell breaks loose. The line is imaginary, but and this is not a concept which is recent. It's been there for eons. And my view is that nations serve the purpose of protecting dharma. And dharma not in your narrow sense of religion. So it is a protector of dharma. You can subsume culture in it, you can subsume religion, you can subsume a lot of things. If nations cease to exist, it will put a challenge to dharma.
What is dharma?
Dharma is your nature, if I were to make it very simplistically. And that is very natural to you. You do things according to your nature. And that varies across the planet. Even though we are all one species, we have different types of things happening. And that's why, and I think the closest thing that you probably will empathize with is culture. But it will also resonate in the way you practice the belief of God. So, I was quizzed about this by a friend, that do you believe in God? And I said, I don't. Because God is. You only believe in things that are not, that could be, that may not be, right? Do I believe it's going to rain right now? Yeah, I can say that. Yeah, maybe I believe, because it's not certain whether it's raining. But there's no question of believing in God, because God is. Otherwise, how do you explain you and I are sitting here at this lunch table and having lunch together? What forces came together for you to come from Hong Kong and for me to come from Mumbai, meet in Singapore for a dinner? You can't explain this. And therefore God is. And now actually quantum physics is getting there. So this is a very interesting article, and I do a lot of quantum physics. I love that subject, about consciousness. What is consciousness? So the long-held view of Western science was consciousness is inside the body. And when the body dies, consciousness goes. Quantum now is realizing and coming closer to the Upanishad view on consciousness, which is that the brain is not the source of consciousness. It's just an antenna that is receiving universal consciousness. And that is why when the body dies, that antenna shuts down. And that is why that body loses consciousness, not the other way around. So if your brain is a recipient of consciousness and this is universal consciousness, all of us are interconnected because we're drawing from the same field. Another way, we talked about AI. So a big threat to AI is what we call as quantum computing. Now, give me a little bit of space here because this will take a little while to explain.
I'm very interested in all these
global
concepts.
all global encryption is based on mathematics. So it's a long 250 digit number which is arrived at by multiplying 225 digits. And all the power of classical computing that resides on the planet put together will not be able to figure those two numbers out. And that is the science behind encryption. You cannot figure the keys out, and therefore you cannot break into it. But this is mathematical. Quantum computing is known to break this. It can actually figure these two out. So how does that happen? Because given all the classical computing power on the planet, this should not happen. So as David Deutsch argues, that this is absolute proof of multiverse. Multiverse is a Upanishad concept. That is not the single universe in which we reside. There are infinite number of universes. And they are all intersecting with each other. So there's this double slit experiment, but let's not go into that. Quantum computing is proof of multiverse because quantum computing can access the compute power in multiple universes at the same time. And there is this one universe on which there is enough computing power to break this code. And it accesses that and it breaks the code. Now you see how we are arriving there. So all this is the role of nations.
So how do you, as someone who is a deep thinker in this space, how do you use these concepts to live and optimize your life and live the best version of your
There's
life?
no optimization in life. Optimization not possible.
Live the best version, because I completely agree with you. I believe a lot in the quantum field. I think that, a lot of us really, because we only have limited senses, we only receive a very limited portion of the world through our senses, but there's so much more that exists that we can tap into if we move beyond our senses. That's how I look at it. And I read a lot about it as well. But I want to understand from your lens, because if somebody is doing some work in that, and this was a concept actually introduced to me by Manish Chokhani, where he introduced a book to me, and now I forget the name. I think it was Dan Brown's book, one of the books which talks about this whole concept of, a quantum field, and you just not allowing yourself to access that field. So, for a lot of young people, I feel, who live, and a lot of us, not just young people, a lot of us live in a very narrow, a very one track life, right? We live a one track life where we think that what we get access to is what there is. But that's not true. So how do you get access to a lot of these other resources in the vast quantum field, and then use that to live a better version of your life?
I think the only known tool to me is meditation. So that's the only way to access a wider field. It has nothing to do with the stock markets. And by the way, there's no optimization of life. That's mythical. Life is, you receive it every moment and you live it every moment. Sometimes you get distraught, sometimes you get angry, sometimes you get happy. So if I were to use Gautam Buddha, so there are two sources of let's say information, right? So there are the sensory sources, so your eyes, touch, nose, etc. So you receive sensory objects. I can feel this mic, this is touch, you can hear me, right? That's So those are the sensory objects. And then there are mental objects. The mental objects are of three types. Emotions, which is everything you feel, like, no, I shouldn't say feel, but emotions. So happiness, sadness, anger, these are emotions. Thoughts, which subsumes everything, including purpose. Purpose is a thought. There's no real bearing in life. There is no purpose. Life has no purpose. It's a thought we create for ourselves. We create our dreams, we create the past, we create the future. These are all thoughts. And the third is feeling. Feeling is either you are feeling good or bad at any moment, right? Any moment you're somewhere there. So these are all objects, and the only way to transcend these objects is meditation. Is so far my experience. I have not arrived there. It's still an experiment going on, and we'll see.
Do you meditate?
Yeah, well, I do. Yeah, I do.
So the reason I'm asking you this is, my show is called The Money Mindset. And I speak to a lot of people. I've done almost 100 episodes now. I speak to people who have really, they've reached escape velocity in their life. Like they were in an orbit, right, where they were maybe living in, some of them were abject poverty, some of them very limited resources. But through their journey, mostly stock market people, because this is my niche, through their journey, they've kind of reached escape velocity, which nobody in their community, like, people who have come from nothing and sitting with 1,000, 2,000, 10,000, 15,000 crores, right, of net worth. So what I've understood from my journey is that there is eventually everything that you want in life exists, but you just don't have, your eyes are not open enough to see it. So like somebody in my earlier podcast was telling me that if you want say a 40 crore house in Bombay, for example, you would think you don't deserve it because maybe you're not earning that much money now. But there is somebody in the quantum field that owns that 40 crore house. So it is not something that is not achievable, right? You just make it not achievable to you. Now, this is a very capitalistic, very materialistic example, but in life, it's like that. So when people ask me, what is the difference? How do I get from, and I get a lot of retail investors who ask me that, we live from paycheck to paycheck. How do we just get out of that? So what's your answer to that?
So Buddha gave a word called Adhishtan, Krishna gave a word called Prarabdh, and there's a lovely book by Richard Bach. I don't know if you've read Illusions.
No,
You
not
must. You must read Illusions. It's a very thin book about getting what you want. There's nothing that is beyond your reach if you truly desire it. And the protagonist there says, you have to truly desire. It has to come from the bottom of your gut. A blue feather. And a blue feather descends. Illusions is a lovely book to read. It will give you that. But the two, Adhishtan and Prarabdha, I think are very useful words here. Adhishtan is the resolve. The resolve. And Prarabdha is a far more complex thing. I don't have an English translation for Prarabdha, but it's as Krishna describes it to Arjun, is that every moment you have total free will to decide what you want to do. Then when you make that choice, and it can be about doing something, thinking, what you are with that choice you have is about anything. Feeling is a choice, doing is a choice, thinking is a choice. But once you have made that choice, then the outcome is fixed. And now the next moment you can make another choice, you can change that outcome and go to another outcome. And the accumulation of all these choices and those outcomes is your prarabdha. And as Krishna argues with Arjuna, it's not only this lifetime, you've been accumulating choices for a millennia. And you have arrived here with all this accumulation, right? So you see escape velocity of these people because they've accumulated all this prarabdha. There is prarabdha here. And it's not luck. That has been very poorly communicated to society in this country. It's not luck. It seems like luck because we cannot explain it. We cannot explain a lottery ticket. So we say, oh, you got lucky. But there is a prarabdha. There's an accumulation of choices that arrives at that moment.
But those choices are also, see, when people say they're lucky, they talk about the privileges that they have to get there, right? See, you and me are extremely privileged to have the social infrastructure, medical infrastructure,
Yeah, we've been making
to
choices for
use the
eons.
resources,
No,
right?
but Sonia, we've been making choices for eons. And I'm not saying that, other people are not making choices, but we all have the ability to make a choice at every moment. I'll simplify this. It's about going to, my generation and younger generation struggle to maintain a routine on fitness. It's a choice you make every morning. I make that choice every morning to hit my mat and to do my asana practice. It's not like I wake up every day feeling so enthused and that, the mat cannot wait for me. Of course not. It's not so straightforward. There are mornings in which I feel really like, let this go. But then I make a choice. No, I want to hit the mat. I have to overcome that lethargy. And of course, there are occasions when I don't feel well. Then I have to make the choice to not succumb to it, because a body that is not well should not be strained. That's the role, by the way, this fellow plays. I just got the whoop band.
I notice you have 2 watches there.
No. So
you have become that person.
No. It's giving me feedback, making me more aware of what may be happening inside my body, because I'm not so fully aware. So that's the usefulness. But the point is that the choice is something that we have to make, and everybody, irrespective of which class of society they live, what wealth they have, they are making choices, and it is going to lead to an outcome. So there is free will, and then there is determinism. And the Bhagavad Gita is such a beautiful blend of these two. And the world is split, by the way. There's a class of people or a group of people who think that it's all free will, and there's another group that think that it's all deterministic. What's the point? But it's neither. It's a blend of both. And I think, when you're making your next choice, just be aware of it. That awareness comes from meditation.
So you feel the reason for your success story is not luck. It is mostly the choices you've made in your life.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
No element of privilege, no element of luck.
But that privilege also is an accumulation of the choices I made.
But it's also lottery of the womb,
I didn't arrive in my mother's womb just by chance. It's a choice I made. It's so beautifully explained in the Upanishads. It's a choice I made. I'm not aware of it. That's a different point. I may not be aware of the choices I make every moment. I am living a very unaware life. I would say my awareness level is slightly better than it used to be, but it's still largely unaware.
I'm sorry, but how do people choose their mother's womb? I feel it's like the lottery of the womb, right? A child who was born in, say, Gaza did not choose to be there. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I think, the thing that I say is that Western science approaches everything objectively, which is from the outside. And the Indian scriptures, if I may use that phrase, the rishis came from inside. Now, the benefit of coming from inside is you're not using your sensory organs. And as Heisenberg has said famously in 1927, a very familiar thing to those who have read the Gita is that the observed is distorted by the observer. And this means that everything in science is questionable, because science is based on observation. It is distorted. So even when you're using a telescope, what you're seeing from the telescope is a function of the limitations of the telescope.
And your own limitations also.
Yeah, well, that is obviously there, rather than what is actually there.
Fair.
Right? So now when you see it from the inside, you're not using these vulnerable sensory objects to observe, which is why the insights that are contained in the Upanishad have stood the test of time, and that quantum physics now is arriving there slowly. हमारे पास 5,000 साल से पड़ा है, मे बी 10,000 साल से, अब quantum physics वहाँ आ रहा है. There is a constant endeavor in the Western Hemisphere and now also Eastern Hemisphere to explain what's happening in the universe. We as a species are constantly seeking explanations. Tigers don't. Lions don't, monkeys don't. They don't seek any explanation. They just live their life as is. We seek explanation. Because we want control. So if we can
We
explain,
want
then maybe
answers.
no. If we can explain things, we can take control of it. So we want explanations. And in our endeavor to find explanations, we have largely approached the scientific world has largely come from the outside, and those explanations have failed from time to time. The most seminal theories of science, with the exception of the second law of thermodynamics, have all been violated. All been violated. The new theories have come up, new explanations have come up. And that is the problem with observation. When you go inside, it's a different journey. Then you're not using these objects. You're not using your mental objects and your sensory objects to explain things. Then the explanations that arise are far more, I think there's greater clarity. I have not arrived there, by the way. I'm just borrowing from the Upanishads. And
No, fair. Everyone goes through a journey.
Heisenberg's principle, by the way, is exactly what Krishna explains to Arjuna as Maya. Maya kya hai? Is basically what you observe is not the truth. That is what you are observing. It's subjective. It's not the truth.
Your subjective reality is different.
The objective truth is different. It's not what you observe subjectively. That's Heisenberg's principle. He may have read the Gita. Who knows?
I must say you are at the peak of the Maslow's hierarchy because you are questioning all of this. So all of your basic demands, your needs, everything has been met, and now you're at the top of the pyramid, which is not a bad place to be, by the way. It's a function of all of what you've done in the last many years.
I'm grateful that I don't have to struggle for my next meal. That it's already there for me, and I have not to struggle for a bed to sleep. These are all the grace of the universe.
Gratitude is the most important thing. Ridham, it was really a pleasure speaking to you. And I think we need to have another episode only on philosophy and spirituality, because I have just realized after knowing you for so many years that you are deep into this as well, which is also, by the way, a very common thing between people who invest in the stock market and who have built a lot of wealth. Eventually, most of them try to find answers.
Why did this nation create all these spiritual insights? Because materially it was hitting an extreme point of wealth. When India's extreme wealth condition arose, that's when spirituality came about.
You mean many, many years ago?
Yeah, many thousands. It's evidence that we must have been very rich. You see, a poor person who has to struggle to get his or her next meal is not going to be...
time for this.
Does not have the bandwidth. It is important to have a stomach that's full.
Yeah.
Try meditating on an empty stomach. One day it will be okay. 2 days it will be okay. Day 3 it will get... It is important to hit... So we must have been so wealthy, so obscenely wealthy to have produced all these people who went searching for something that was more satisfying than material wealth. So it's not coincidence that, all your wealthy podcasters, I'm not there in wealthy terms. All your 100 odd fellows have made much more money than me, but they're all searching for a greater joy in life.
Purpose, maybe.
Yeah, I know it's stupid to say this to somebody who has not arrived there, because you have to do that. You have to go through that journey and then arrive there and say, okay, then what are you going to do with all this?
Fair.
Right? So the Western world, resorts to charity. In this part of the world, charity is also not going to give you joy, and giving it up has no meaning. It is not yours anyway, but you search for a higher truth.
Wow. And thank you for letting me pick your brains for almost 2 hours. It was really a lot of fun. And I will do another episode with you, not on the markets, but on your spiritual journey, because it's an area of deep interest to me as well.
So you're getting rich.
I don't know whether it's getting rich. I think it's just, so for me as well, like I come from very, very, very lower middle class background. Like my parents used to live largely from paycheck to paycheck, and they had a limiting mindset in the sense, money was like a fear driven, the relationship with money was tough. I have actually got out of that through whatever my limited means and all of that. So I feel a lot of gratitude, and I feel like there are reasons for it. I've always felt it's luck. But now, of course, I'm asking more questions. But yeah, I mean, it was great speaking to you. Thank you so much for your time. And hopefully, you had a fun time
Yeah,
too.
yeah, yeah. It was good fun. Thank you, Sonia.
We'll do another long one on philosophy. A big lesson lined up from you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. And thank you to our viewers for watching.